Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today is Sunday, October 26th, 2025. And because it's a Sunday, the last Sunday in October, this is our Global Town Hall Day, and I am just about to open the door and let people in. Who's here? Eric Schechter, Fireflies, which is a bot, Sue, and Marilyn Kruger. You can't beat that. Four wonderful people, except I don't know Eric yet. We'll get to know him right now. Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Marilyn. Good to see you again.
Hi there. Bill's not going to be here today.
He's not?
No, he has work.
Well, he's going to be in my inquiry, though. Do you know that? And you
No-
could too, for free since you're a member.
Oh, yeah, that's on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, you want to be a member?
Yeah, I do. I definitely want to. I don't know if I'll be able to go to all of them, though. That's the only problem. But yes, I would
Yeah.
like to go.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. What we will do is record each one. That they won't be public for the, other people to see, but
Uh-huh.
the ones that you miss, I'll give you a URL to an unlisted Zoom link so you can watch what you missed.
That'd be great.
Okay?
Yeah, that'd be really great.
Um,
Okay, so do you want me to officially sign up then, or?
Uh, yeah, go to our main page to
Mhm.
savetheworld.ca, and there's a pop-up window, or
Okay.
if there isn't, you can click on the yellow thing, and it'll give you the information you need to sign up. Terrific.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
know you sent me the email, but
yeah.
it's just, I'm like, oh boy. Yes, because I have various work things and clients. So that was the only thing that was worrying me. But yes, I will sign up.
Mhm. I don't
Sounds
want
fascinating, by the way.
I don't want to compete with the importance of the psychiatric well-being of cats.
That's right.
It's important.
And wildlife, and wildlife.
I want to say hello to Eric Schechter. Hello. Have you sort of look familiar, but I'm not sure we have met before, have we?
I don't recall. I've been in a number of Zoom meetings of different organizations. I haven't been to this one before.
Here's Paul Werbos, looking
Hi.
like you've got something. Is what's behind you? Is that supposed marble or something?
Yeah, my wife said this room is a total mess. And when I was going to have a discussion with a scientific group, she said, you've got to put a new scientific type background. And it took me a while to figure out how to do it. This is one of the many pictures taken by NASA by gravitational lensing, which is a real way of taking pictures. It's a picture of what our universe really looks like.
What do you mean it really looks like? Not those colored pictures that we see all the time? Those aren't
I
real.
don't know what pictures you see all the time. I've seen a lot of weird pictures out there,
Yeah, beautiful
mostly pretty
colors.
local.
And I
This
was
is the
wondering,
universe as a whole. Most of the pictures you see are pretty local. This is the whole bloody thing.
That's
yeah,
interesting.
it really is, isn't it? Yeah. It looks sort of like the marble, the thing behind people at the UN, that marbly
It would be
appearance.
nice if they could see the universe. That would be nice.
So
So I
now,
can
are
say,
these streaky things, these big
yes,
white streaky things, white and blue, are they galaxies or what are they?
the streaky lines are a vast network of what people call dark matter, although it's half energy, half matter. They hold together the universe. The little pink dots are the galaxies.
Really?
All the galaxies, at least all the ones that have life, are little pink dots on the network of dark matter.
So each of those dots that we're seeing is actually a whole galaxy.
Exactly.
Wow. And where's the Milky Way?
You know, that's something I never bothered, but you know what? Since this picture was taken from our solar system, I suspect this is of other solar systems, not ours. Ours would look the same. It just, that isn't where we're taking pictures from right now.
How could you think you could be taking pictures from a different solar system? Can we do that now?
Well, NASA actually has sent a few probes to try to go beyond our solar system, but I don't think they have this kind of machinery.
No,
they don't.
Wouldn't have thought so, but my goodness, how would I know? Anyway, that's really interesting. Now, I thought dark matter was still totally invisible and they don't know anything about it, but you've got photos of it.
Yes, we have thousands of photos now. There was a time 10 years ago, I was skeptical about the idea of dark matter. But now that we have photographs, it's pretty clear it's there.
And what do they think? I mean, what is it? Do they know any more about it than they did before?
Well, I'm such a crazy person. I believe I'm closer to knowing what it is than anybody else on this planet. But I know for sure we got to do a lot of experiments to find out what it really is. It's not like my speculations are going to be the truth. I can think of possibilities. I have interesting possibilities. But what we really need to do is new empirical work to see the sky better, to know what we really face.
Could it be like neutrinos?
Yeah. It sounds like Brian, but I don't see your face, Brian. Are you hiding again?
Oh, good morning. It's 4 a.m. here in Australia, so I'm on audio, and I'm wondering, neutrinos have mass. Why couldn't it be like neutrinos?
It depends on what you mean by the word like. We know for sure it's not neutrinos. Among other things, neutrinos don't form these big, massive agglomerations. And people have looked for neutrinos. That is an experiment people have done, is to look for neutrinos. And in fact, there have been a lot of experiments with different older theories, and none of the older theories really works.
But how do we know the density of neutrinos in other parts of the universe? All we have is a local flux of neutrinos. We don't know the galactic distribution or intergalactic distribution of neutrinos with mass.
It's kind of interesting because you remind me of a paper by John Wheeler many years ago, which was one of the first attempts to do a thermodynamic analysis of the universe, really accounting for neutrinos. Mm-hmm. But my understanding, my impression is that there are much more credible explanations, and I have some idea how you go about doing the experiments. But the first thing you got to do, I think, for a realistic experiment is you don't have it totally rigidly tied to just one of the billions of theories. It certainly has to do with the way nuclear forces work. And neutrinos are sort of a core element of what's called the electroweak theory. But I claim there's evidence that the electroweak theory is not the whole story. And it depends on how you think nuclear forces really work. Yeah. But I've been told this is a dangerous subject. I should only discuss with the right people in the right place, because nuclear forces can become dangerous depending on what we do with them. And if we screw up AI, for God's sake, imagine what we would do with new nuclear forces.
Right. Well, in a nutshell, what's your favorite hypothesis for the nature of the dark matter, if not massive neutrinos?
An alternative model of nuclear forces.
Yeah. That's at the fine scale, but you're showing, zillions of parsecs here. So at the large scale, these particles are something that have mass. What's your leading candidate under the standard model?
My leading view is that more than half of what we see in these pictures is a fluctuation of what we would call force fields, not normal particles. And one of the theories that's been disproven for many years, people thought it was common sense as good scientists. Of course, we're seeing big and giant structures. It must be massive particles. And there was a theory called the WIMP theory, weakly interactive massive particles. And it was like a religion. You had to believe it or you were an anti-science person. But they did all the empirical work, and the WIMP theories don't work. And they're not among the leading contenders anymore.
Right. That's interesting. Well, I guess Professor Sean Carroll would agree with you when it comes to fields, but not when it comes to forces. Because forces are not fundamental, but fields are.
To me, fields and forces are the same.
I don't believe so. Why don't you check out Sean Carroll, Hopkins?
I've checked out one hell of a lot of stuff. You should check out Albert Einstein, for God's sake.
Well, no, Sean Carroll's second book distinguishes the difference between forces and fields, and I encourage you to read it.
I have no reason to read ancient Old Testament fiction. I'm a little past that point.
But I'm not sure Sean is ancient, since he's a current professor.
What scares me is when I read current literature, a lot of times from one decade to the next, it seems to be regressing backwards in time in the level of depth of the physics.
Okay, guys. Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Exception, and I encourage you to check out his work. It's really profound. He was at Caltech and Johns Hopkins.
Let's just talk to Eric Schechter. Maybe that'll give us a new starting point. Hello, Eric. Tell me who you are and why I should know you.
I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a retired mathematician. The background picture that I chose is something related to the Mandelbrot set, but I don't know the details of that, so I won't be talking about it. For me, the reason I came here is because I'm interested in saving the world. For me, the three most immediate threats to the existence of our species are, in this order. First, climate change is speeding up. It's accelerating more than most people realize. And if it gets a little worse, we're all going to starve to death. And second one is nuclear war. That's less certain, but it could happen. And the third thing is all of the consequences of capitalism, which I would include climate change and nuclear war both as consequences of capitalism. And so really the root cause of all our problems is capitalism. And I can talk about that at great length if anyone is willing to listen. And
well, you definitely have a chance to talk about whatever you care about the most. But I would have to say I was with you through 1 and 2. That's my 1 and 2. I don't know in which order, but I have 3. 1, 2, and 3. My third is not capitalism. In fact, I don't know whether I believe in capitalism, but some version of it would have to maybe, there are a lot of changes, but I think it'd still maybe be capitalism by the time I got through with fixing it. But the third one is AI. And Paul right here is with me on that one, and maybe he would certainly put that number 1. Is that right, Paul?
The thing that has hit me more and more is that we're facing threats on several different timescales. And
yeah, that's true.
And I keep learning, and we've got to keep learning. If we don't keep learning, if we're not agile, we certainly will collapse. This year, the risk of a global nuclear war that combines the risk of nuclear war with the dangers of AGI together really hit me, because I see a possibility of human extinction within the decade. I still care about climate change. I've been tracking climate change. My verdict on that is about the same as it was 5 years ago, which is, yeah, by the end of the century, we could kill ourselves off. But there are nuclear wars which could happen a lot sooner than that. And that's not news I wanted to hear, but I think it's irresponsible to ignore that kind of news.
And I think AI could be even quicker.
Well, it's connected. I loved the speech by Zelensky before the United Nations in their big session on AI. And Zelensky said, you know, we got all these great theories and concepts, but damn it, when you got fleets of Terminators over your head, killing people in your neighborhood, and it's expanding and growing, and it's becoming global, and it's over your head, and you see people dying, you're not going to just laugh it away. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Zelensky's point of view on this.
Well, actually, because you mentioned that, I checked it out and watched him, and you're right. He certainly makes a very interesting point about the importance of AI in warfare and how the whole thing is changing the nature of warfare, for sure. Um, but and not but what I did is I put it on to the list of suggested additional readings and viewings. I made for this inquiry, which starts, by the way, on Wednesday, and I hope some of you will actually participate, but you got to sign up and register first. Um, in sending out the final program of things that we expect people to do, everybody's supposed to do a little homework in advance, but it's only an hour and a half or so. Whereas I made a list of 20 some additional sources, articles, and Zoom, videos of people talking about other related and important points. So I added Zelensky to that list. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, I would ask, I didn't see Zelensky's speech, but I would ask, sure, it's true that new technologies such as AI can make wars worse, but I would ask, why are we fighting these wars? And I would say it's because of capitalism.
Okay, you want to talk about capitalism, and the
Well,
floor is yours.
I just wanted
Let her rip. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to I just wanted to mention it. I don't know if everyone wants to hear about capitalism. They've probably heard about it before.
Well, yeah, we have.
Go ahead.
I already told you I don't agree with you, but that doesn't make any difference. I think I think I don't agree with you. You might turn out and show me I do, but
All right.
everybody here gets a chance to talk about what's on their minds, and if that is your number three threat to humanity, we better
No,
give you a listen.
it's really number one because it causes the other threats. All right,
Fine, go ahead.
I'll
Tell
talk
us
about it.
I don't. I mean, sure. Go ahead. Let us. Maybe you can convince us. Go for it.
Okay, I'll talk briefly. I will be brief. For hundreds of thousands of years, we shared everything. That was the way we lived. We shared in our work and in our play and in our food, and it was good to be among friends. That was human nature. But about 12,000 years ago, when the Ice Age ended, for some reason we cut down on sharing. We started having more private property. And I say that was our big mistake because it causes all sorts of terrible things. If you have separate property, then you have separate lives, and that kills empathy. All of a sudden, your neighbor is not necessarily your brother or sister. Your neighbor is just some stranger, some rival. And so we had that was the beginning of wars and of inequality and poverty and plutocracy. That means rule by the rich and all sorts of bad things. And that's where capitalism came from. And so that's and then capitalism causes all these other things. If you have loss of empathy, then you're going to have wars, and you're going to have, well, all those other bad things. Okay, that's enough.
I would agree with you, Eric. And there's evidence now that Homo sapiens is 300,000 years old, based on the skeletons discovered recently in Morocco. And only 6,000 of those years have been what I want to call extractive. And that kind of started with the Sumerian civilization, 4000 BC. And so really it's only 2% of our existence as a species on this planet that has been, let's say, city-states or nation-states and extractive with what's called lootable gains by one of the interviewees of Nate Hagen's in The Great Simplification. There's actually a PhD out of Cambridge. He wrote this wonderful book that's just out called The Fall of Civilizations. And it goes in great detail. He studied 400 civilizations and figured out why they fall. And I think it's an epic work that we all should read. because it really does talk about extraction, and it talks about these lootable gains and how the few convince the many to, through taxes and tithing and all the rest, to concentrate. In fact, the current Pope said, when he was in South America, this poor mother came up to him, and he was serving in the church in South America. And she said, "Why does the church have so much in the way of gold and these gilded altars and everything, and the people have so little?" And that has haunted him ever since. And he's been in service to the poor ever since. That's Pope Leo. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Now, what I wonder, in all of this has to do with the notion that there's some relationship between people and property or physical things. That is, I guess, the notion of ownership, that people can claim that this piece of thing, obvious thing, this material is mine. And so I don't know how we're going to get around that. But if you are arguing that somehow nobody should own anything, then I want to know, if you're going to manufacture something or even carve an arrowhead, and you make the arrowhead and it's not yours, somebody can take it away from you or use it, or you're not supposed to even take it home with you. You're supposed to leave it there or whatever. I don't know what kinds of rules you want that do not involve the notion that somebody can own something, property. Would you explain how you're going to run the world without that? And if you have that, you're going to have something like extraction and capitalism, as I understand it.
I would say that I would like to see a change in our relationship with each other. I would like to see people caring about each other and wanting each other to do well. And so if I have a bunch of arrowheads and you don't have any and you want or need one, I will give you one because I care about you. And that's the system I would like to see more of throughout the whole world. For, when I walk down the street and I see homeless people sitting on the sidewalk, it hurts me. I feel pain just seeing them. There's not much I can do about them. I'm only one person. Sometimes I give them some money. Sometimes I don't, because I've only got so much money. But it's just, I feel for other people. And I think that's the way it should be, that we should feel for other people, and we should try to help out other people and try to share.
I agree. And Marilyn thinks so.
How do you propose to get there? How do you propose to change how people are, the nature of people?
I don't know, but I will say one thing. I look at climate change, which is changing. It's changing faster and faster. And my reaction to that is, if we don't change our way of behavior, quite soon, we're all going to die, all of us. And so I just think that might be a motivation. If we say that, maybe some people will be motivated to change. I don't know.
See,
Brian,
my feeling is that, Eric, if you lived in a world in which there were infinite number of arrowheads and there's no problem, there's no scarcity, then of course we would have no problem sharing. The problem is, if we need arrowheads and some people are making them and other people are taking them and using them but not producing, then we got a problem. Somebody who makes the arrowheads, I think, has some legitimate reason to say, I made that, it's mine, you leave it alone, go make your own. And that's ownership.
What would you say to your children if you've got something that your children want or need? Do you have any children?
I would. The problem, of course, is that we do have children who need things and need more things than there are to give. Obviously, if you had everything in the world and could give money to all these people on the street, you would do it. So you didn't, because there's not enough money. And the same with whatever your children need. There are many millions of children in the world who don't get what they need because there's not enough to go around. And then we have to figure out how we're going to allocate what there is. And is there a reasonable principle? Well, in a way, you could say that if you're the farmer and you produce the food, then you can feed your children first. If you have any left over, then we got to figure out what to do with it. But if there's not enough for anybody's children, or it's certainly not enough for everybody's children, then we have to figure out what kind of principle to use on deciding who gets first crack at it.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, but you have to understand, Meta, we're living in 6,000 years of scarcity mentality. And we need to transition from the economics of scarcity to the tribes of abundance that Eric is talking about.
When we have plenty of, and there is no scarcity, there'll be no problem making that transition. The problem is there still is scarcity, and we are not making that transition. It's a very good idea to plan a dance, exactly as you're doing, for the expectation that pretty soon there's going to be no scarcity, that everybody will get as much of whatever they need as they want. I'm not sure that's what I look forward to, but go for it. Tell how
yeah, I mean, along those lines, we're at the very cusp within 10 to 20 years of abundance of energy through battery, wind, and solar, abundance of food security through precision fermentation, precision agrivoltaics, and precision mariculture, and abundance of labor through artificial labor. There'll be 1 billion robots in 10 to 20 years, and the cost of labor is going to drop from $10 an hour today to $1 per hour in 2035 and 10 cents an hour in 2045. And so what we need to do, I think Eric's right, is to chart the stepping stones that will get us from the economics of scarcity today to stellar abundance in just 10 to 20 years, based on what we know about energy, food security, and labor.
Good. Okay, you do that right now. You have the floor.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, that is the stellar thesis. The three legs of the stellar triad are energy abundance, food security abundance, using 7 to 70 times less land area than we are using presently. We can feed 10 billion people and restore most of the pasture land to wild habitat for the 8 million species who can't vote. And that will, in fact, provide the ecosystem regeneration that'll be needed to regenerate healthy climate on land and sea. And that'll enable gigatons of carbon fixation in seas and soils, while at the same time regenerating the ecosystems upon which we depend enormously. And we seem to have disconnected humanity from the rest of nature, and yet that is the foundation of our food security, and we've just forgotten about it. I mean, it's like we're so disconnected from growing our food, and I think this is a great opportunity. And then finally, we have to come to terms with the fact that we're going to have to figure out something to do for a living, and in 10 or 20 years, it's not going to be selling our time to make money. It's going to be, this when we have abundance, it's a lot easier to be generous, as you've said. And if we have an abundance of energy, why not share with our neighbors? If we have an abundance of food, why not share with our neighbors? In fact, my partner just went down to the thrift shop locally, and there was an entire bag of avocados, which they gave to her for free because of the abundance of avocados this week. I think that's a wonderful example of kind of this giving economy. And I would say, ironically, Burning Man kind of puts forward that burning economy for 1 week a year. But we need to get back to our ancestral roots, which is really that of generosity, particularly at the individual scale, and that 98% of human history that actually determined our DNA, not the 6,000 years of extraction, but the 294,000 years of human nomadic. Instead of being property owners, I like to think of ourselves as stewards of planet Earth. Mm-hmm. In other words, how can we steward our time here, our limited time on ocean planet Earth, so that we can actually regenerate life in the soils and life in the seas rather than extract. And I think that is our higher calling. And that's what we hope to do at the Climate Foundation with our Stellar Startup Studio, focusing on these abundances that will enable communities of abundance to be formed. And those are stellar communities that we are beginning here in Australia and are looking forward to seeding 1,000 points of light around the world. And these are stellar communities around the world that will be based on the abundance that Eric is speaking of.
Yes, I am thrilled that you're talking about what it's going to be like when there's an abundance. But we have to plan not just the technological way of producing food, and I'm glad that you're working on the fact that fermentation will solve the problem, et cetera. That's wonderful work. But there also needs to be a reorganization of the socio-political system that we live in. And I haven't heard you talking about that. That's what I'm concerned about. If we are going to, when we do have an abundance, I think it'll take care of it. That part, the technologically, it'll take care of itself. But the abundance hasn't come yet, and we should be planning exactly for how we're going to distribute things and how we're going to control material possessions and so on. You and I are using some equipment here that I could not personally manufacture. My camera, my screen, my computer, etc. I have no idea. None of us could do that. So there are corporations that produce these things. Now, what is their ownership rights? And how do they sell them? And what are the rules about how much they can charge and how much, what the conditions under which they can make us use them and become dependent on them and censor our access to them and et cetera. These rules have to be worked out. And I really hope we can start doing that now.
The patent system actually provides an exclusive for 17 years, and then it becomes public domain. So everybody can improve it after that. So that's a good model that works already. And what you're touching on is social permaculture. And that is, how do we evolve our communities so that they can advance the social frameworks that are in parallel with the technology. And at the small scale, I encourage the use of sociocracy, which works well on the scale of this meeting and could be, a half a dozen to 24 people. It works very effectively. It has been used in larger companies as well. And at the larger scale, I encourage the use of modern polity and the work of Audrey Tang, who managed to be the digital ambassador for Taiwan for half a dozen years or more, and actually came up with wonderful solutions using citizens' assemblies, using sortition. He managed to find a solution to deep fakes in Taiwan just in the last 5 years. And that solution is detailed in Nate Hagen's Great Simplification podcast, in which Audrey Tang is interviewed and describes how he solved deep fakes for the entire nation of Taiwan just in the last 5 to 10 years. Thanks.
As a matter of fact, I don't think you've read your email yet, because I sent you a copy of my correspondence this morning with Audrey Tang. I have invited her, and these days it is a she, to be a speaker in our forum series. And I'm hoping to do that before the end of the inquiry that begins on Wednesday. However, she says she can't do it. And she referred me to a guy named Glenn something, who is apparently willing and eager to be interviewed. So I expect I'll make a forum in the next few days with Glenn about the work that Audrey Tang has done in Taiwan. And because you were right, there's some brilliant innovations there. Anyway, it's good to start off with such a zinging controversy, although I don't know that we haven't shed blood yet. Anyway, I want to welcome Robbie Tulip, who's, I guess, in Australia.
Yeah, what I'm interested in at the moment, Meta, is the planetary problem of albedo, and the idea that restoring albedo ought to be the political priority for climate action. And so my sense is that the sequencing of climate action really needs to be reversed to place the restoration of albedo as the top priority, and that will enable the global thinking that is needed for action on carbon. I just feel that action on carbon has become so intractable and also too small and slow. I think the issue is that action on albedo is the only thing that's got the potential to scale rapidly to prevent tipping points. And so I follow this debate very closely, and I find the public debate on these issues really distressing. I feel that the politics is very delusional, and so I'm just really interested in pushing that. I would like to see an albedo accord established on the model of the Montreal Protocol, just because I believe that repairing planetary albedo, that is reflecting more sunlight to space, is not a wicked problem. I think it's actually a relatively simple problem, and that if we applied concerted effort, then we could consider the Earth's albedo layer, that is clouds, snow, ice and aerosols, as analogous to the Earth's ozone layer, and we could just assess the most effective ways to restore planetary albedo, provide a significant scientific investment, and that would then buy the time for the action on carbon. I think that we're in a quite an apocalyptic climate situation. I think our planet is just far more fragile and sensitive than people realise, and the thing that can stop us tipping over the cliff into a hothouse is higher albedo. I'm particularly concerned about subtropical marine clouds, where the clouds are vaporizing. That is, they're turning from liquid into gas, and I see that as a primary tipping point, but it's not recognised as a tipping point. For example, in the latest Tipping Point 2025 publication from Tim Lenton of Exeter University, he rejects the idea that...
From where?
Tim Lenton is from Exeter University in the UK, and he's one of the top world experts on tipping points. But he's totally opposed, or he has in the past been totally opposed to solar geoengineering. And he's a typical example of the just deep confusion, because I would say that if we don't apply solar geoengineering as soon as possible, then there's a whole series of Earth problems that are just teetering on the edge of catastrophic situations, and especially biodiversity. So I see it as the primary moral problem.
I certainly welcome what you said. I agree with you 100%. But I know that we've got a lot of filling in to make other people see the background enough to recognize it. So I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm not sure how many people even know what albedo is now yet. It's the amount of reflection that incoming sun rays have because things are white or silvery or something, and it bounces the light back into space before it has a chance to heat up the world. And it turns out that although we focused on the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, which retains heat once it gets in, we haven't paid enough attention to the amount of reflectivity, especially from clouds, because these white clouds that cover the planet reflect light back into space, and there are less and less of them, and they're vanishing and have diminished and could be replenished rather easily, as far as I know. I know that we now have not only Robbie Tulip here, and thank you for that, because you're part of an organization that I think we want to hear more from, and that is the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, which has a wonderful exchange of information every day. There are dozens of emails among the members talking about these technical points about global warming. And I want to have more contact with you guys in an official way so that you put on a show now and then that you think is especially key. And I know that you're very key on this, Robbie. I know that also Peter Wadhams has a lot of thoughts about the importance of Arctic sea ice, because that reflects light to the ocean, to the back out into space. And if it vanishes, the world absorbs more heat because the ocean becomes dark instead of white, and therefore that it absorbs more heat, and this increases the heating of the world. Peter, do you have anything you want to join on this point?
Yeah, I was going to say the challenge is that there's a huge challenge here, which Robert's mentioned, which is there are many sources of high or low albedo in the world. So you, in a sense, you have to have a kind of catalogue of sources sources or sinks, sources of high albedo, and look at them in turn at what do we need to do something about. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge, diverse problem, and something that's a real challenge that you've got to decide what albedo, what parts of the albedo problem are actually key and which ones can be sort of neglected. And regarding sea ice, I mean, there's a whole area in itself. You don't just talk about sea ice albedo because it's white or not white. It's the changing albedo is a function of processes that are going on all the time to add or subtract to the amount of snow. So I think you've got a huge challenge here, which is that some aspects of albedo are critical, others can be neglected, and then some aspects of the albedo problem are actually need to a huge amount of work to be done on them. That is to say, including the albedo of ice and snow. So you've got it's a key problem, but it's a big one, and so I sympathise with the effort to what do you do? What things can you neglect in the albedo problem, and which things should you treat as key?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, Peter. And I think along those lines, surprisingly, it's not the sunlight hitting the poles that's the greatest heat flux to the Arctic, nor is it even the Gulf Stream that's sending lots of heat up towards higher latitudes. But according to notable atmospheric science professors, help me, Robbie, our friend at Leeds University, he
is that Alan Gadian you're talking about?
Alan Gadian.
Yes, Alan Gadian. Mm-hmm. At lower latitudes, it's the marine cloud brightening that determines the latent heat transfer of moisture from lower latitudes to higher latitudes, and actually contributes the most heat to the Arctic. And we can restore the latent heat transfer by rebrightening marine clouds at lower latitudes that will reduce the latent heat flux into the Arctic. And I think by rebrightening our lower latitudes, which is a different form of albedo moderation, we can rebrighten our planet and improve the odds that the Arctic can refreeze. It may be that in the winter we want to consider cirrus cloud thinning as well in order to improve the radiation of heat into space in the winter.
Yeah, look, I think that those are really interesting comments from both Brian and Peter. Like there's an assumption among some Arctic activists that action in the Arctic is the most important thing to cool the Arctic, whereas what Brian is pointing out is that there's such a vast quantity of heat flowing both through the air and through the water from the tropics, which are so much bigger and hotter than the poles and so much more accessible than the poles, that if we can find a good way to cool either the tropics or the subtropical regions, then that will be that may prove to be the most effective way to slow the melting of polar sea ice. And but it gets onto Peter's point of what are the most effective interventions, and this is where investment is needed. Like, I just don't think it's right to preempt the question of what's effective by saying, oh, I think having a white car instead of a black car, or I think marine cloud brightening or stratospheric aerosol injection or marine nanobubbles. Like, there are lots of different ways that it would be possible to restore planetary albedo, and like the stratospheric aerosol injection is the most prominent. But whether it's safe and effective, it needs a really significant political recognition and investment in order to determine what are the best strategies. And so my argument is to be quite agnostic on the technology. Like I think on Peter's point about where is the albedo, there's been good research by James Hansen. He calculated that about a half of the albedo is from clouds, and about 20% is from ice and snow, and most of the rest is from aerosols in the atmosphere. And the surface albedo provides a relatively small contribution, like deserts and painting buildings white and that sort of thing. But that's not to discount necessarily urban albedo, because the heat island problem is quite significant. And so turning towns from black to white is a good way of reducing your air conditioning bill and just generally improving the climate and weather of cities.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really operate at planetary scale. At planetary scale, we need to think of planetary processes. Brian.
Yeah, I think there's been a great case to be made for the sponge city. In fact, planting trees around cities improves evapotranspiration and reduces the temperature increase in the urban heat islands. So not only making the buildings white, but planting a lot of trees and actually enabling the water that does rain on the city to actually percolate down through the pavement and into the top meter or so of the soil, enables that evaporation to take place when it does heat up, and that keeps the city much cooler. So we have to go back to nature on that one as well.
And that concept of evapotranspiration that you mentioned is really quite central, because I know, Brian, you've done really good research on terpenes and dimethyl sulfide, and like dimethyl sulfide is the ocean tang. That is the smell that you get from seaweed when you go to the ocean. And that's a chemical that's made by seaweed and other ocean plants that goes up into the air and makes clouds. And if we could have more dimethyl sulfide, for example, one that Brian mentioned to me was the Santa Barbara Channel in California, which used to be totally full of giant kelp, and it's all died now. Like this death of giant kelp is a really dangerous signal. If they'd still had all of their giant kelp in the Santa Barbara Channel, then the Los Angeles fires probably wouldn't have happened because they would have had a more stable climate. So there's really significant security benefits from the restoration of kelp, dimethyl sulfide, clouds, albedo. It's all connected, and so there's a whole connection of the albedo restoration to the trees, plants, seaweed, algae. Just a new way of global thinking that's looking towards a circular economy, but just starting in cooperation with our existing economy. Not saying, we have to transform every sector of our economy in order to fix climate, but just we need to build the new in the presence of the old.
That's great, Robert. And I would say we go even beyond a circular economy, and touching on what Eric had mentioned, a circular ecology. And that is that nature measures exchange, if you will, as nutrient flows. And by having a circular ecology of nutrients, we can enable this to work. And you're right, both macroalgae seaweed and microalgae plankton have a pivotal role to play for the production of biogenic cloud condensation nuclei that can rebrighten our marine clouds and actually reflect enough sunlight back into space. We can get back to pre-industrial levels of terrestrial and marine brightness to actually have a much cooler climate. And this is something that's been grossly underappreciated at the IPCC. They both got the radiative forcing of greenhouse gases too low, and they haven't accounted sufficiently for the contribution of aerosols to keeping our planet cool. And that's really essential. And in the higher latitudes, it's dimethyl sulfide with the algae, and at lower latitudes, isoprene and mercaptan are very important compounds that are naturally produced as well. And these are compounds that we need to measure and actually appreciate the role and the ecosystem services that our kelp forests and other seaweed forests and algae forests play in actually regenerating the brightness of ocean planet Earth. And that's how Mother Earth keeps cool, is by rebrightening those marine clouds. So let's get back to pre-industrial brightness, physically,
I totally favor this, but
morally.
I have a silly question, if I may. It just occurred to me. Yes, the Santa Barbara Channel was full of kelp before. If it came back, would it get in the way? I mean, do ships going through get slowed down by bumping into too much kelp?
No, it's mostly along the shoreline. And of course, these large ships bound from LA to China are going through the middle of the channel. They're much larger than the hectare platforms that we would use even offshore. But at near shore, there's plenty of room for kelp. And offshore, we can operate marine permaculture vessels, as with any vessel operating and operating with the maritime laws, which are older, in fact, than the real estate laws that we have. And those maritime laws can ensure the separation of vessels and the safe operation of those vessels together.
But there's no problem of clogging up the waterways.
No, if we use 1%, of the exclusive economic zone of the U.S. or Australia, for that matter, we could actually reduce emissions from agriculture significantly. We could remove gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and we could provide the biogenic cloud condensation nuclei that'll be needed for climate repair to restore the brightness of ocean planet Earth.
Okay, why haven't these kelp survived there? What took them out anyway, and why? And how much trouble would it be, or how expensive would it be to put them back into, say, the Santa Barbara Channel?
100 years ago, with the industrialization of farming, there was a huge amount of runoff, which decreased the visibility in the water to the point where the juvenile kelps couldn't grow from their base 25 meters deep. There wasn't enough light because of all the mud and silt and in fact, nutrients that were washing down in the rivers and polluting the waterways. So 100 years ago, I think we saw the first devastation of kelp that occurred in the 1930s and 40s, as verified by USGS maps of the time. Since then, in the last 20 years, it's ocean warming that has actually put a lid on the upwelling of nutrients that are essential for kelp to grow. And thus, we've seen a second devastation of kelp, another factor of 10, that has reduced the population to 1% or less of what it was pre-industrially. Mark Twain said in the 1800s, the coldest winter he ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. And the reason was the prodigious kelp beds that were in Northern California in the 1800s that we have maps of. And those are 93% gone today, probably more. In the last 20 years, we've lost 90% of those kelp forests in Northern California. And thus, we're not getting all of the clouds and cooling that we used to keep ocean planet Earth cool and comfortable for humanity and 8 million other species.
And to add to that, with Brian mentioned the warming of the ocean, and here in Australia, we've got a boundary between cold ocean currents that come from Antarctica and hot ocean currents that come from the tropics. And with global warming, that boundary between the hot and the cold currents has been drifting towards the poles. And so there's lots of places like around Tasmania that used to be bathed by cold water from Antarctica, and now they're getting hot water from coming down from up north. And the kelp is adapted to the cold currents. So if one of the things I'd like to see is Australia take a lead on recooling the Southern Ocean. So, like, if we added a whole pile of salt to in really tiny particles to re-brighten the clouds of the Southern Ocean, then that would restore the habitat for the kelp forests of Tasmania, which has really significant fisheries benefit. We've just seen this horrendous toxic algae bloom that's just killed large swathes of marine life in South Australia. And it's because of this indifference to our planetary systems that this sort of thing is happening and is likely to just get worse. So we've just got to recool, like for Australia's benefit, we've got to recool the Southern Ocean. I would say that for the USA, there's enormous cloud banks off the west coast in the North Pacific, and those cloud banks are evaporating because there used to be an air inversion layer that just sat on top of them. And with global warming, that air inversion layer is being destroyed, and so the clouds are evaporating. It's really a primary security problem, and it should be addressed in a bipartisan way. Now, I know Brian wants to jump in on this too.
Yeah, I agree with you, Robert. And it's ironically the combination of whale poo and penguin pee that actually keeps Antarctica cloudy for much of the time. And in fact, one of our colleagues, Hugo, is actually putting forward a wonderful program called Positive Polar, which is working to research these and provide people with the cruise experiences that are carbon negative and climate positive, including going to the Arctic and Antarctic each year. And I encourage you to check out Positive Polar and consider a $100 investment in that effort to really bootstrap this research that could really help to save ocean planet Earth.
Actually, I have done an interview with him. We have, among our series of 723, I think, forums, hour-long conversations, I did one about a month ago with Hugo and with his partner in the business. I can't think of her name. Jessica?
Jen.
Yeah. And they have a wonderful plan to have people on a ship go around and enjoy the exploration of the Arctic waters and watching the whales and so on. But I thought the most interesting thing was that, whale poop is extremely important, it turns out, because it creates the nutrients for phytoplankton and so on. And we don't have enough of the whale poop because we kill too many whales. So one of the pleasures that one would have from taking a cruise to the Antarctic on this enjoyable liner would be that you could contribute your own poop. That apparently they will take the contents of the ship and the effluents and even the food waste and make it into a suitable supplement to the poop that the whales contribute. And therefore you have this virtuous feeling that your trip to the Antarctic is not all just selfish and for your own pleasure, but that you are sharing something important with the world. But I did not know, however, nobody has mentioned to me the importance of penguin pee. I have heard about the whale pee, but I also have had a wonderful conversation with a guy about a year ago about the size of the whale's genitals. It seems the most amazing thing that I've ever seen in my life is the erection of a wonderful blue whale, which was caught on film, and it's really quite impressive. But the pee I didn't hear much about, and certainly not the penguin pee. So, I'm not sufficiently educated about these matters, and I hope one of you can bring us up to speed on what we need to know about certain unmentionable processes that the whales perform for us as a service to the planet.
Yes. Well, the whales contribute the nutrients, particularly iron and other nutrients, that actually enable the plankton to grow. The plankton produce dimethyl sulfide, and that dimethyl sulfide provides provides the gases that can help cloud condensation nuclei grow. Now, there's a question about how those nuclei get formed to begin with, and people think that it's the ammonia from sources like penguin pee that actually form that first nanometer nucleus around which the sulfate molecules, like dimethyl sulfide, grow and accrete the nuclei up to 100 nanometers, which is where they are very effective as cloud condensation nuclei. So it's the combination of penguin pee to nucleate those aerosols, the first nanometer, if you will, and then the sulfate to grow them from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometers. That actually combination is very effective in producing the clouds that we have over Antarctica in the summer.
Isn't that wonderful? See, I didn't know that. And does anybody else have any salacious material you want to share here?
Not so much salacious, but just this recognition of the volume of biomass as a really critical factor for planetary security. And I don't think, there's been a focus on the permanence of sequestration in terms of understanding the carbon cycle. But I've taken the view that if we could just restore the volume of living material in the ocean surface, even though it's in constant cycling, that would perform a very significant carbon sequestration function. And it's partly the amount that stays in the biotic layer at the surface, but also the amount that falls to the bottom. It's just a really important element in safeguarding the climate. And as Brian was pointing out, if you've got a really strong biotic layer, then that helps to protect the coolness of the planet. It's this Gaian homeostasis is the scientific process.
I agree with you. And I was shocked to run across this statistic from the World Wildlife Fund that 70% of all vertebrate life on ocean planet Earth is gone since 1970. We've lost 70% of all vertebrates on this planet in 70 years.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Mm.
Yeah, it's we're in that's a sort of apocalyptic scenario, unfortunately, and so we need to just shift our paradigm, become open to new thinking, and I would say, like it's really quite difficult for us to shift away from the hydrocarbon economy in a big hurry. Like the economic disruption that we get from shutting down coal and oil and gas, it just means that we just face we face very strong political opposition. So like we see from the Trump administration, my view is that the main reason that they're attacking climate science so aggressively is because climate scientists have launched an attack on the fossil fuel industry, and Trump is saying, look, the real power in this world is with the fossil fuel industry, and we will show you, pesky scientists, exactly where power lies by defunding you and attacking you. So my sense in terms of a tactical approach on climate is that going a bit easier on the fossil fuel transition is needed, because really the main heat problem is already there from our past emissions. There's 2.5 trillion tons of CO2 that's been added to the atmosphere already. So we've got 2.5 trillion. We add to it by about 40 billion a year, which is about 2%. If we talk about decarbonising, then we talk about slowing the growth. See, the thing is that decarbonising the economy just isn't really at climate relevant scale. We just have to start thinking about actions that are at climate relevant scale and that are politically and economically acceptable. So I think that there's a whole scope for new thinking about climate change, and I would love to see a lot more public debate about these sorts of issues.
Yeah, it'll take all three legs of the climate triad for us to get back to healthy climate, and that is emissions to zero, 2,400 gigatons of carbon removal, as Robbie said, and climate repair. And of those three, the only one that's been demonstrated to work in a matter of months rather than decades is the climate repair dimension of this. And thus, if we start with local and regional marine cloud rebrightening with transparent accounting and furthermore engagement of communities that want to help lead the way on this, I think we can, on a very local and regional level, start with marine cloud brightening and really demonstrate locally and regionally how much the climate can be repaired. It's quite likely that a lot of the California wildfires in Los Angeles could have been avoided if the IMO had not had their aerosol policy enforced in the early 2023, and just some 18 months later, maybe 24 months later, they had a huge fire problem. It's not random that those two events occurred; they're closely related.
They've taken the sulfur out of shipping fuel, and suddenly there's just this enormous spike in temperature, cause and effect.
Yeah, that's the third time. That was May 2025. The IMO cut all the sulfur in the Mediterranean, and just 2 months later, we had 8.5 degrees Celsius of sea surface temperature anomalies in the Western Mediterranean. Cause and effect. The third time, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It's 3 times now for the IMO, and they were on notice with a public letter from the Healthy Planet Action Coalition in 2023 and 2024 that this problem was occurring, and still they put this policy into effect. It's like a huge aircraft carrier. They can't turn in time because of these intergovernmental organizations. But we have to.
But I mean, you know why they did it. It was a good motive. There's a lot of harmful stuff that occurs because of people trying to do good deeds. And in this case, of
It
course,
is.
we want to remove the pollutants from the atmosphere, and people do get poisoned by all of these aerosols and so on. That's what I'd like to hear more about. You've talked a lot about the cloud, the reflectivity of clouds, but if Jim Hansen is right, that the biggest problem of all, or the biggest blessing of all of these pollutants in the atmosphere, these aerosols, then we've got a mixed blessing. And I want to know how much of it we want to take out, for what reason, and what's it going to do to our lungs if we do. And in fact, could we put up some new stuff that would be harmless to people, but would have the same effect in terms of producing albedo? Is anybody talking seriously about new chemicals that we could put up there that would not be dangerous?
We don't need new chemicals. We can use the old ones. First of all, just restore the source of biogenic aerosols that have been working for eons. And then secondly, submicron sea spray, which you can see if you just go to the beach in the summer and look up and down the coastline, you can see the haze that's over the beach line, and that's because of all the sea spray and biogenic aerosols that are coming in. And that hazy layer is exactly the aerosols we're talking about. And by restoring the biogenic cloud condensation nuclei and the submicron sea spray, we can actually do a great job of this. And for ships at sea, we're not proposing more fossil aerosols. We're proposing the submicron sea spray that can be put on the back of every ship and re-brighten those ship tracks, which have had an important role in cooling the North Pacific, the North Atlantic, and the Mediterranean in years past.
So that's not just their effect on clouds, but I mean, I'm a little confused because clouds are aerosol too. And when Hansen talks about, it gives a quantification of how much of the effect comes from clouds and how much comes from aerosol. What are the other aerosols that he's talking about? Does he count these things that you're want to spray from the back of a ship? Is that because they become clouds, or is it because that in itself, that haze, counts as aerosol and is an additional source of albedo?
Cloud condensation nuclei, before they form clouds, are aerosols and haze. And so one leads to the other. And so there are two contributions, but by restoring the level of natural aerosols that we had pre-industrially, we can actually restore the haze reflection and the formation of marine stratocumulus clouds that are so effective at reflecting sunlight and keeping ocean planet Earth cool.
Okay, well now that's excuse me, but I really am hot on the trail of this, because I remember talking a lot with Peter Salter when he was working so hard to develop a perfect nozzle, because he thought that what was really the bottleneck or the obstacle to getting the kind of marine coloration we want was that they didn't have a nozzle that would work anymore, or so far, that they needed one that would give just exactly the submicron measurement of salt that needed to be, or salt water that needed to be sprayed. And that's what you needed to create clouds. But you're telling me you don't need are you telling me you don't need special nozzles that we don't even have yet, but even spraying ordinary seawater, like with our garden hose or something, would do it?
Well, they've demonstrated in Russia, there was a paper in the last decade showing that millimeter scale nozzles with effectively the equivalent of a pressure cooker works very well. You have steam coming out of a pressure cooker. Mm-hmm. Well, with that right circumstance, they found the temperatures and the pressures that they could produce submicron aerosols thermally, and that research is continuing at Cambridge. We've been collaborating at the Climate Foundation with one or two of the graduate students there, and with Professor Hugh Hunt, who is researching this. And we are working to try to continue that collaboration in the UK as well as Australia.
Okay, thank
you. Those nozzles exist, and they're being demonstrated.
Talk at the Preventing 2 Degrees conference held 2 weeks ago by the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, and he commented that the ability to produce submicron monodisperse particles, that is, particles of the same size, is still not something that's been solved in a way that's scalable. So the field trials of marine cloud brightening that were conducted by Daniel Harrison and Southern Cross University on the Great Barrier Reef used a method that was extremely expensive, just using a lot of energy. And so to scale it to climate relevant scale requires that the costs of generation of salt particles be brought way down. And so Brian's mentioned Russian research. There's a range of other researchers, but what's required is the public recognition and the investment. I mean, like the speed with which we produced vaccines for COVID, admittedly they had problems, but it's an illustration that when governments recognise a security problem, such as a pandemic, that they can throw resources into rapidly solving it. And I'm quite certain that that's the same thing with climate. That if we threw the resources into rapid cooling, then we could get rid of this excess heat. I did want to comment also on the IMO. I think it's absolutely extraordinary that the IMO, backed up, I must say, by the IPCC, and the COP process, they are totally indifferent to this problem of albedo that they have caused by their totally negligent decision on sulfur in shipping fuels. Now, it's important that sulfur be removed in coastal areas where it has a health risk, but the idea of removing sulfur in the deep ocean is just totally wrong. And yet their attitude is, well, fuck off, we don't care about what you say because albedo's not a thing. That's the way they think. And so it's sorry to be so crude about it, but there's this sense that, like you look at somebody like Peter Wadhams, Peter got it wrong about sea ice, so we don't even need to worry about it. Sorry, Peter, but that's like the sort of dismissive attitude around these sorts of questions is a total scandal. It is a moral outrage. It is directly contributing to the collapse of biodiversity and our planetary extinction and our risk of civilizational collapse. So there's very high stakes questions which are just excluded from the public attention, completely censored out of public view. It's appalling.
I agree, Robert. The IMO should be funding this research to replace and atone for the previous sins and going overboard. And then furthermore, we have, in spite of the work at Southern Cross University that said, it's too expensive and all this stuff, we've identified the marine solar energy that can do this with just 100 square meters. We've got enough power to produce a submicron sea spray system that could actually help the Great Barrier Reef. And then furthermore, in spite of all the fossil fuel gyrations and the administration's trying to support it, the reality is battery, wind, and solar it's a done deal. I mean, that's China is taking the future. They installed 93 gigawatts of solar in the month of May. That's a gigawatt power plant every 8 hours, every 3 times a day throughout the month of May. And their coal use actually dropped something like 5% in the last year. So, the future is being abdicated, if you will, to China. And they're the renewable energy superpower. And we're hoping in Australia here, we can get to 70% renewables by, is it 2030, Robbie? So I think there's a great opportunity. We're seeing the death throes of extractionary fossil fuels.
Well, Brian, I want to go back a little bit because you referred to something I didn't know anything about. You say that, yes, you can, with just a few square meters, you can produce enough power to handle the problem that that Robbie mentioned, which I wasn't aware of either. Can you elaborate on what in the world, what source of new power you're referring to that could handle that problem?
Yes, according to the late, great Stephen Salter and others, it's roughly on the order of 100 kilowatts to produce 10 to the 17th cloud condensation nuclei per second at submicron scale, which would be sufficient for the formation of marine clouds, according to Professor Alan Gadian and others. And so to do that, you need about 100 kilowatts. And when the sun is shining brightly onto the sea surface, it's about a kilowatt per square meter. So literally, 10 by 10 square meters will capture that 100 kilowatts thermally, which is enough to get the water up to pressure cooker temperature with a little bit of topping from solar photovoltaics. Will be at the pressures and temperatures needed to use those Russian nozzles being tested at Cambridge. And we've got some nozzle improvements actually that we've been working on at the Climate Foundation that will result in enough submicron sea spray to complement the biogenic cloud condensation nuclei we hope to regenerate with marine permaculture platforms, restoring algae production across the Indo-Pacific and the Caribbean, and hopefully the Mediterranean.
Thank you. And Charles David Tauber, I presume, is in Vukovar, Croatia. Is that right, Charles? And I want to welcome you, but also I think Rose Dyson was here for a second. Now I don't see her. And we've had some people joining us who don't show their face. I would encourage Ron at U of T, whoever Ron is, it doesn't say, to please unmute yourself or open your camera up so we can have a good look at you and invite you to participate in some way. And Rose, are you there? I'm going to give the floor to you if you want to say hi to us and tell us what you're up to, and then we'll move on. Yes, Rose.
Yes, I'm here, and I found the tail end of the last conversation very interesting. I wish I'd heard it from the beginning. I think I heard some references to COP 30 and some disturbing things that are going on at its outset. I just heard on the news that I think it was CNN, or maybe I read it in the New York Times, that there are fossil fuel ads that are blanketing Israel on the eve of the COP beginning. I don't know what that implies going forward.
Fossil fuel ads blanketing Israel.
Advertisements, yes, in Brazil, yes.
Oh, in Brazil. Oh, okay. That figures. I mean, yeah, what do you expect? Sounds reasonable to me, expect that. Yeah, okay. Well, by the way, I want to encourage people in one respect. We have nothing to say about this, but in the COP meeting, there's going to be one progressive thing that will happen in Brazil this time that never happened at any of the other, or at least as far as I know, never happened at any of the previous COPs. And that is they're going to have a citizens' assembly about what's going on, as far as I know. And of course, they will select people by sortition, so you can't volunteer to participate. But I'd like to follow it. And the wonderful thing would be if they actually do take up some of the questions that Robbie has been so agitated about and telling us that we shouldn't be so upset about. Because if there's moral slouchiness going on in the world, that the Citizens Assembly would be a good place to bring it up and bring it to global attention. Now, hello, Ron at U of T. I want to greet you. I don't know who you are. What do you have a surname?
I'm at full name is Ronish. I actually just recently graduated from computer science at U of T, and what brought me to this meeting was Paul Werbos. I very much enjoyed his one-to-ones or interviews with you, and I was just looking to learn more about AI, AGI, and he rarely talks, but when he does talk, it's very interesting to chime in. And now I'm learning a lot more about climate change as well, like albedo and all the other things that you guys have been discussing. So it's very nice to be here. Sorry, I mute myself. My face is a mess right now.
since I am overloaded with complexity, I probably should remember more about you than I do. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you're into.
So right now I'm just learning about AI because the professor who taught the course or manufactured the course at UFT, he's speaking out against all the dangers, and I'm not entirely sure like what he sees as the danger. And Meta also mentioned in one of her other videos that she's a good friend of Hinton, and she mentioned that the professor himself.
I can't claim that. I never met the man. I admire him immensely, but I can't claim buddyship.
Sorry about that. But you did mention that his solution towards the danger was like something about motherhood and like wanting to technologically bake in that solution or that way of thinking. And that's something that I'm looking into right now. I haven't gotten that far, but I'm still trying to absorb knowledge and just be around.
Well, let me offer you something. And everybody else here. On Wednesday, we are beginning the first, and Rose has already signed up, and I think Marilyn is going to.
I did.
Sign up to join and participate in the citizens' inquiry into the risks of AI. And Brian is also going to participate. So we have several of you who will be engaged with this conversation. It will go on for 1 hour every Wednesday for 4 consecutive Wednesdays. And it's a public conversation with people who may be smart and more familiar with AI technologically than any of us, but also a lot of people who may not know anything at all about it, except that it's sort of part of the internet, or something very vague. But we will be having these conversations an hour for each week, and they're on specific topics. The first one will be about the economic impact of AI, including unemployment and unequal distribution of wealth and the competition between the US and China in particular. The second week will be about deep fakes and disinformation. That, of course, disinformation has already been there in the internet as a problem for some years, but deep fakes, in a way, are new because they are mostly generated by AI. That is, those are videos that have been tampered with and made into, you can make people say things and as if they look as if they're really saying things that they would never have said, and therefore it's quite possible to spread misinformation about people and make them seem to be saying things that they wouldn't say, which is very disturbing, I think. And we have no regulation for that. So the problem of trying to ensure that we get access to valid information through our contacts with platforms, AI platforms, and just plain internet platforms. That needs to be discussed. The third one will be about the problem of agency, that as artificial intelligence turns into what is called artificial general intelligence, or then into something called super intelligence, which will be much, much, much smarter than all human beings put together. We will have no way of judging how wise the advice is that it's given or the policies that it generates. And we will have turned over a lot of our decision-making opportunities to our AI friends, the little gadgetry that AI produces for us, and it will make decisions for us, and we will not be in a position to counteract what it decides. So that danger is, of course, the one that worries Geoffrey Hinton the most, and also Bengio, and also the other third person in the so-called godfather of AI triad is Jan LeCun, who is, I guess, at Microsoft. Or maybe I have his location wrong, but anyway, he's the only one who is not as concerned. But lots of the others. Now, I did an interview about a week and a half ago with Francis Fukuyama, who is famous to everybody because he was the author of the notion of the book called The End of History back in the 1980s at the end of the Cold War. And he had a conversation with Stuart Russell, and Stuart kept on talking. So we have an hour and a half long video of that conversation.
I actually watched that one very recently.
Good. Yeah. And Stuart is the person, a co-author of the book that is used in practically every introductory AI course at university level in the world. Something like 140 universities at least use his textbook as the introduction to the subject. So he knows his stuff. He also, we deferred the show for a week because he ran out of time. He had to be in Buckingham Palace that day giving a talk to the advisors of the king. And so we put it off and had this conversation a week later, which I think you'll all find very, very interesting. That will be one of the assignments for people who have joined the Citizens Inquiry. Before every meeting, every 1 hour meeting, it's expected that the people who register and are allowed to participate in meetings, which will be sort of like what we're doing right now with Zoom, that you will have spent about an hour and a half in advance reading some of the things that we suggest or watching videos that we suggest. So you have some common basis for a conversation about that topic. The fourth in the series will be about plans for alternative ways, or not alternative, but ways of regulating AI. And I have to say, I do not have all the materials in hand for that. I'm having difficulty getting in touch with people who will talk to me about it and who really know, who are the right people. The point is that we do not have sufficient regulation for AI now. We really need, and it is really crucial for human survival to be able to put controls over some of the things that may be most dangerous. And it could be done through the various platforms in Silicon Valley claim that they're doing it themselves. They don't need any regulation. The government of the U.S. is removing even the few restraints that the Biden administration had put in place. And there is no, the EU has created some regulations, not adequate, but a good start. But the U.S. is now trying to pressure them to remove those regulations. In other words, they want the U.S. government, Trump wants the Silicon Valley brothers of AI to have a free hand to do whatever they want as fast as possible, but even no matter how dangerous that is. So there's a lot of pressure on the EU to remove what they have done. But the thing that Stuart Russell pointed out to me, and I had not known about it at all. In fact, I'm even having trouble now finding adequate information about it. And that is something that he calls redline.ai. Red-lines, plural, .ai. That's a website. You can go there. It doesn't give you very much information, but it was an effort coordinated, I think, partly by the Future of Life Institute, based, I think, Max Tegmark at MIT runs it, or another guy named Anthony Aguirre, if I'm not misspelling it, also is the co-chair or something of that organization. And they have been very important in promoting this. They have endorsements from certainly all of the, people like Hinton and Bengio and Stuart Russell, but also heads of states and, all kinds of Nobel laureates and governments and so on. So I'm trying to get a forum organized to have a conversation with the right person who can tell me how that all happened. But we need, so far as I can tell from talking to Stuart Russell, that's the most promising angle to take if we want to actually support the creation of adequate regulation of AI. So I hope that some of you will want to join, but you must hurry up because it starts on Wednesday. And what you do to join is you need to go to our website, which is to savetheworld.ca, TOSAVE, etc., to savetheworld.ca. And there you'll see a pop-up window which will tell you a little bit, and then you can click and see more. And if you click, you can find a place to apply for membership. And then you need to become a paying subscriber to our Substack. And that is unfortunately, if you have trouble paying for it, if you're really broke, let me know and I might make some accommodation to you. But we do need to use this as a source of paying for some of the costs of running this. Okay, now I've given on a little bit too much information for you to digest at one whack. But let me go back to Ron and ask, do you have other things you want to share with us about what you're learning about AI and what your opinion it may be, and indeed how we can best contribute to the discourse on this topic, because I'd really love for dozens of people to sign up and participate. And some of the people who will join us are members of Project Save the World already, because they have contributed in the past to various projects that we have done. And so they are already members, and therefore they are welcome and eligible to join without paying any further subscription fees at the present, although their subscriptions may run out pretty soon. The membership expires eventually. Back to you. Thank you for being here. Tell us, I'm sorry to take so long, but you gave me an opening.
Thank you for the detailed breakdown. I'll definitely sign up for that, but I might need your help for the payment. But in terms of the AI stuff, actually, I'd like to go back to the beginning of the conversation when Eric, Brian, and the others were talking about capitalism. Since I'm still fairly young, for me it's very apparent that there's a big wealth inequality gap. The recent report by can't remember the organization, but it was a major organization that said that 99.5% of adults own 48% of the wealth, whereas 0.5% own the other 52%. And as a part of the 99.5%, it's apparent to me that with the increase and rise of AI, it's not going to be that trend is just going to widen rather than shrink. And I'm not really sure how to think about the dangers of AI, knowing that fact. And especially with the rest of the conversation that was going on about climate change, the albedo effect, the diminishing of whale poop, and all of the other components that were discussed, it was now I'm more lost rather than having a more condensed understanding. So I don't really have much to say. I'm just sitting here trying to absorb as much information as I can.
I should say, with a lot of these kind of issues where I have gotten very deep, the people who say they know it all are usually the ones who don't. And the people who do know it are very predictably going to say, there are a lot of things I don't know. So it's reassuring to hear you saying the more realistic thing for everybody.
Yeah. Also, we should point out that some people are already talking seriously about the use of something called the universal basic income. That is to say, everybody would receive an income whether or not they work, because as Brian has been pointing out, I mean, AI does have the potential of not only AI, but a lot of other new technologies have the potential of really eliminating scarcity. There will be enough to go around. People should never have to go hungry, because everybody in the world, there will be plenty of food and way more than we need. So everybody should get a free, living, whether they work or not and contribute or not. And then we have a new problem. A new set of problem is, how do people make meaning in their lives if they don't have jobs? Hello, Alexey. I didn't even know you. Welcome. Well, Alexey is in Warsaw, I guess. Are you? Hi, dear.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm here in Warsaw. My pleasure and my honor to be with you today. Thank you for having me. And the topic is really so interesting that just I'm eager to at least maybe at best I would like to join the discussions if possible, or
Yes.
At least I will listen to them. I will watch carefully, because it's just we are in for a very dire thing. AI, it can make us or break us, and I'm glad you just mentioned this part, having a meaning in life, because hunger is just the lower part of the Maslow pyramid. No one will die of hunger, maybe, but millions of people might lose any meaning, any purpose in their lives. We live as long as we can make a difference, I guess. It could be said. It's not only about survival. I guess many people won't just be able to handle the loss of meaning. So so when a child is making a drawing, when they try to be creative, what's the real meaning? What's the real impact of AI on them if they know that they will never draw anything that AI cannot draw in a second? So why bother? Why try? So I'm really sorry about the new generation that only enters this world right now. So I'm really I don't know if it's going to be part of the topic, how AI will influence the youngest generation, who is yet the people who are yet in their teens, maybe who are yet toddlers. How will they live? How will they live in the new world? How will they develop? And how will it affect them? So that's what I'm eager to be introduced to.
That's the second problem that will occur when we succeed, or when we can see that we're not going to exterminate ourselves. In the shorter term, Hinton and there's another guy, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's just published a book called something like, if anybody builds it, everybody dies, or if anyone builds it, everyone dies, something like that. But anyway, he's claiming that that we will exterminate the human population, and Stuart Russell does not deny that that's a possibility. So there are a lot of these people, Hinton and Bengio, and these people are really, really worried. And so, I'd be glad to face the kind of problem you're pointing out, which is that we don't know how to fill our lives with meaning, because that means we've got to the point we're not actually having to fear that we're going to be exterminated as a whole species. Anyway, I'm talking too much, and I do want to greet Rose Dyson, because Rose has been, I think you put your hand up, didn't you, dear?
It seems to me that in the list of economic considerations for our first session, there's no mention of the huge amounts of water and energy that AI is supposed to require. And I know that somebody in the chat here has said, well, batteries and solar will solve the problem. I don't know how that produces water. Just off perhaps there is a way. But the news today on CBC and New York Times, and I think CNN, there's been a lot of emphasis on the incredible amount of water that just one of these artificial intelligent plants require. And I think a lot of these service providers, or whatever you want to call them, are moving to Canada and requiring water from the St. Lawrence River, which is already low because of climate change factors. So it's been pointed out by others that in the final analysis, we can get by in life and without data, but we can't get by without water. It seems to me that we have to consider those aspects in whatever we talk about in regard to AI.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I actually was not aware of that, so that's another issue.
So in a weird way, this might come back to that capitalism issue.
Okay.
And I didn't talk about it.
Schechter has his hand up, so let's be.
Right. Okay,
give the
I'll
floor
skip
to
it.
Eric.
We'll skip it.
Yeah, Eric.
All right. On the question of artificial intelligence, I think that people may be not asking the right question. But to explain that, I need to make an analogy with the question of, say, nuclear energy or atomic energy, or what do you call it? Subatomic physics. You could take the subject of subatomic physics and you could ask, is that a good thing to study or is it a bad thing to study? Well, it depends on what you're going to do with it. When people first started working on that stuff, one of the things they said is, oh, we're going to have cheap, clean energy. And that never actually happened. We don't have cheap, clean energy from nuclear power plants. I think it's still possible we may get there someday if we improve our understanding of how these things are done. But I'm saying if we could get cheap, clean energy, that would be a good thing. On the other hand, subatomic physics has also been used for making nuclear bombs, and that's been a bad thing. So you can't say that subatomic physics is good or bad. It depends on how we use it. And that depends on something in our society about what is our attitude? What are we planning to do with this? And I think the same is true of artificial intelligence. Whether it comes out good or bad depends partly on what direction our culture goes in. Are we going to become more kind to one another, or are we going to continue being focused solely on competing against each other? I think competition is a bad way to go, and it leads to bad things.
Well, just in response to what Eric is saying, there was one commentator today that would say that really the development of AI right now is very much testosterone driven by the big tech company owners or CEOs. I mean, they each have their own approach to it. So there's not much evidence of the kind of I suppose ethical aspects that are probably going to be necessary if we're not going to do ourselves in with the technology.
Doesn't that have to do with money? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, how much they can make it when you're talking about the big companies or whoever, it's how much profit is there going to be for the corporation or for the individual. And I think that is a real driving motivation. You know, I think AI is a tool that could be used, as Eric was saying, it could be used for good or it could be used for bad. But when it comes down to people, I don't have a lot of faith right now. Let's put it that way. I'm pretty pessimistic. But with a lot of things, I think money is going to be a prime motivation.
I have not greeted Charles David Tauber, and Charles has been here a while and is a regular of ours. So hello, Charles. How are you?
What can I say? We're fighting. In terms of peace, I was just writing something. First of all, we're in financial difficulties as an organization.
I should say where you are. are in Vukovar,
Right.
Croatia, and you have been there about 30 some years, working
That's
as a psychiatrist, helping people who are suffering from the effects of war, the traumas that persist after
exactly.
conflict. Okay, go on.
Exactly. We talk to people online, and we're seeing that the situation with the traumas and with peace, because this, after all, this forum is meant to as a forum for peace, and there can be no peace to my mind without working on trauma. And we're seeing, for example, in Gaza and the Middle East and here and in many parts of Africa, that the trauma is being transmitted and creating more conflict, and it's not being solved, and nobody is working on it, and there's no money for it. And that's one of the problems. And so we're fighting that. We're fighting it very badly. So if anybody is interested, please contact me. And we have a number of groups. We're continuing this work, but the financial side is very, very bad right now. And not only the financial side, but nobody's taking account of it. And that's part of Trump. That's part of all the rest of it. So we're fighting on every front.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any comments you want to add to some of the topics we've been discussing so far? We certainly gave plenty of attention to global warming issues, albedo particularly, but now we've been focusing more on AI. There may be other issues that we are neglecting that we really feel a need to we would be ashamed if we forgot to talk about.
I think the amount of money that is being spent on war, and I will not use the word defense, I will call it murder. Let's not call them departments of defense. Let's call them departments of murder. And that, instead of working on reconciliation and finding ways of creating peace, and again, the trauma issue is one fundamental part of that. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are getting close to the end, but I do want to make sure that we've covered a variety of other topics that maybe we should discuss. Certainly, some of the geopolitics of the day it should be not forgotten. If you have a cause, an issue, a hobby horse, some routine that you want to promote that's going to help save the world in any way, here's your chance. We have about 5 minutes in which to talk about your issue. That's you. All right, go for it, Brian.
The first corporation in America was nonprofit. It was 1 vote per shareholder, not 1 vote per share. And I think it's important we recognize that money is not wealth. It's a proxy or illusion for wealth. And the illusion is perpetrated by the powers that be. True wealth is an abundance of energy, food, and labor. And that abundance is something that we're researching at the Climate Foundation with our Stellar Startup Studio to actually help to bootstrap stellar communities that can provide people with an abundance of what's needed for a happy life. And that includes energy, food abundance, nature, and abundant labor available. So I think we need to help, to aim for that. People were concerned about water. AI can use seawater. It can also desalinate water when there's enough abundant energy. And that's a key part. And you'd mentioned universal basic income, but I would suggest that these universal basic services may be an even greater priority to some extent. And so we should consider the ramifications of communities providing universal basic services along the lines of the stellar output rights that are described in the stellar book. Professor Jan LeCun is one of the exceptions who actually encourages and has encouraged the development of open source AI. And of course, Llama 4 model is open source. The weights are available, and that pathway enables the decentralized use of AI by the many rather than the few. And that is the key difference, is will AI be in the hands of the many or hands of the few? Jan LeCun is clear on this, and he's helped lead the way at Meta with the open sourcing of frontier models. We can have plenty of water and energy if we use battery, wind, and solar. And it's a tool. It's not a panacea. It's not going to be, heaven or hell. I think we need to ensure that AI as a tool is in the hands of the many and not the hands of the few. And thus, we have to rely upon open source initiatives, such as the ones that are being pioneered by Meta with Llama 4, for example. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody may have an answer to that. Alexey, you look as if you're taking a deep breath. Are you getting prepared to say something?
Yeah, I just sorry for being a late comer today, but as soon as as you mentioned, geopolitics, I would just like to throw a word honoring the brave people of Ukraine who are still struggling in their close to the end of the fourth year of their brave and really very valiant struggle against oppression, against aggression, against the Ukraine of today is a David fighting off a Goliath, a very dire Goliath who is still willing to conquer that country, that democracy. And I guess I'm having here several Ukrainian families whom I'm trying to help to the best of my ability. And the suffering is still there, and I would just like to, I would just like us to, just for a minute, to remind ourselves about them, and that the war is still going on. It's people, the world is getting tired of that war, but let us not forget that some justice should be done in that war. Let's hope for that.
And let's hope in a more general sense of, I think we need to think constantly about the problem of enforcing international law, not only making it, that needs to be developed, mechanisms for the legitimate production of international law, but and adjudication and so on. But main thing is, how do we enforce it if a country aggresses against another country and they get away with it, and the rest of the world allows it to continue and does nothing to stop it? We get exactly what we deserve, which is a chaotic world. Yes, Charles, you close to the last word.
Okay. One of the, it's to punctuate what Alexey said, and that is that European governments are not allowing in Ukrainian refugees. They're making it extremely difficult. The other thing, and we're working with them, is Russian deserters and Russian conscientious objectors. And again, the European governments are not allowing them to come in and to gain asylum. And this is a huge problem on this side of the Atlantic, and with the European Union and other governments.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Okay, we could go on with that. In fact, that's a hobby horse of mine, something I'd like to come back to again and again. And I do keep bringing it up. Thank you all. It's been a fascinating conversation. Share it with your friends. I think there are other people in the world who would find this discourse worth joining and listening to, participating in. So, and those of you who want to participate in the Citizens Inquiry, please go to savetheworld.ca, fill out click on the right place and fill out the forms, and do it now because the thing starts on Wednesday, and it's really the last minute for this. So thank you all. It's been fun. I'll see you in a month. Bye.
Thank you, Meta.
Bye.